Imagine a product so powerful that it generates profit without producing anything tangible, a product so invisible that most people don't even realize they are buying it every single day. That product is debt. And far from being a neutral financial instrument, debt has been deliberately crafted into the most profitable product in human history. It has funded wars, toppled empires, enslaved nations, and quietly drained the wealth of ordinary people. And yet, ask most people where debt came from, who designed it, and why it dominates our financial system, and they couldn't tell you. Well, debt isn't just a number on a statement. It's a force that dictates where you live, what you eat, even how you dream. You might think you're in control, but the truth is, debt is the puppet master pulling strings you didn't even know existed. Welcome to the shocking truth about debt. You know, there's this thing we all deal with, debt. It's not something you can hold in your hands, not like a car or a house or even a loaf of bread, but it's everywhere, shaping lives, bending economies, and making fortunes. Here's the wild part. Debt doesn't actually make anything. It's just a promise, an IOU, a number on a screen, yet somehow it's become the most profitable product humanity has ever invented. Think about it. When you borrow money, you're not just paying back what you took, you're paying extra, sometimes a lot extra. That extra, that's pure profit for someone else. And the best part for them, they didn't have to build a factory or grow a crop or ship a single thing. They just created the debt. It's like selling air, but better, because air doesn't come with interest. Banks and lenders have turned this into an art form. They package debt, trade it, sell it, and make more money off it than most industries make from actual goods. It's a system that runs on trust and numbers, and it's so powerful because it doesn't need anything physical to keep going. Just the belief that someone, somewhere, will pay it back with a little extra on top. And that's how debt became the ultimate product, the one that keeps on giving without ever needing to be made. So here we are, living in a world where debt feels as common as the air we breathe. Mortgages, student loans, credit cards, it's all just part of the package, right? But how did debt become such a ubiquitous part of our lives? It wasn't always this way. There was a time when owing money carried a weight, a stigma even. Now, it's practically a rite of passage. So what changed? Was it the banks, the policies, or maybe something deeper in how we see money and what it means to owe? The answer isn't as simple as pointing fingers, but it's worth asking. How did we get here? And more importantly, where does it lead? You know, there's this idea floating around that debt isn't some modern invention. It's been woven into human society since the very beginning. Think about the Mesopotamians, way back when. They had these systems where people could borrow what they needed, but here's the kicker. Every so often, they'd just wipe the slate clean. Poof, all those debts, gone. It wasn't about being careless with money or resources. It was a way to keep the whole system from crumbling under its own weight. Imagine if we did that today, just hit reset and started fresh. Sounds wild, right? But back then it was a survival tactic, a way to keep things from spiraling out of control. Maybe there's something to learn from that. Another theory is that debt really took off when powerful banking families stepped onto the scene. Take the Medici, for example. They weren't just rich, they were smart, using loans to build entire empires. By lending money to kings, merchants, and even the church, they turned debt into a tool for control. It wasn't just about making a profit, it was about shaping economies and politics. And as their influence grew, so did the idea that borrowing wasn't just necessary, it was normal. The Medici didn't just lend money, they changed how the world thought about it. Debt became a way to build fortunes, not just a last resort, and once that idea took hold, there was no going back. You know, if you dig into the past, you'll find that debt forgiveness wasn't some rare thing. It was actually pretty common. The ancient Mesopotamians had this practice called a clean slate, where rulers would wipe out debts to keep society from collapsing under its own weight. Even the Bible talks about a jubilee year, where every 50 years debts were forgiven and land was returned to its original owners. It was like hitting the reset button. But here's the thing, just because it happened back then doesn't mean it's the norm now. Sure, those societies had their ways of keeping debt from spiraling out of control, but today, debt is everywhere. It's baked into how we live, how we buy homes, how we go to school. It's not just about forgiveness anymore, it's about the system itself. Maybe the real question isn't why ancient people forgave debts, but why we've built a world where debt is almost impossible to escape. It's easy to think that once the big banking families got their hands on the money, lending just exploded overnight. But here's the thing, it didn't quite work that way. Sure, the Medicis and the Fuggers were throwing around loans left and right, but debt back then was still kind of temporary. A king borrows for a war, pays it back, or doesn't, and that's that. It wasn't until the 1600s that things really changed. That's when debt stopped being just a quick fix and turned into something permanent. Governments started formalizing national debt, turning it into this big structured system. Suddenly, borrowing wasn't just for emergencies, it was part of how countries ran. And once that happened, well, that's when debt really became the backbone of modern finance. It wasn't just about having money anymore, it was about managing it, growing it, and making sure it never really went away. It wasn't always like this. There was a time when people saved up for what they wanted, when buying something meant you actually had the money to pay for it, but somewhere along the way, things changed. The truth is, debt became the everyday product sold to the masses with the advent of mortgages, car loans, and credit cards. It wasn't just about necessity anymore. It was about convenience, about getting what you wanted right now and worrying about the cost later. And once that door was opened, it never really closed. Borrowing became normal, even expected. Payments stretched out for years, decades, sometimes a lifetime. The cycle started and it never truly ends. You pay off one thing only to take on another. It's just how life works now. It's easy to throw around big numbers and not really feel them. $300 trillion, that's more than 3 times what the whole world makes in a year. But what does that even mean? It means every country, every business, every person is tied up in this web of borrowing and owing. It's not just some abstract problem for economists to debate. It's the reason your rent keeps going up, why your paycheck doesn't stretch as far as it used to, why governments cut services or raise taxes. Debt shapes the roads we drive on, the schools our kids go to, even the wars that get fought. And the wild part? Most of us don't even realize how deep it runs. We're all just trying to get by, but the weight of all that debt is pulling the strings behind the scenes. It's the invisible hand, but not the kind that helps. It's the one that keeps squeezing. All right, let's talk about debt. It's one of those things that can sneak up on you if you're not careful. The first step to avoiding the pitfalls is simple. Know what you're dealing with. Grab a piece of paper or open a spreadsheet and list out all your debts, loans, credit cards, anything you owe. Seeing it all in one place can be eye-opening, but it's the only way to really understand where you stand. Once you've got that list, it's time to make a plan. Start by tackling the debts with the highest interest rates first. They're the ones costing you the most over time. Even small extra payments can make a big difference. And here's the key. Stick to the plan. It might take time, but every payment gets you one step closer to freedom. Now, the other side of this is avoiding new debt. Before you swipe that card or take out another loan, ask yourself, do I really need this? Can I afford it without borrowing? If the answer is no, it's better to walk away. Debt isn't always bad, but unnecessary debt can hold you back from the things you really want. So take control today, know your numbers, make a plan, and think twice before taking on more. Your future self will thank you. The first step to tackling your debt is really understanding where you stand. Grab a pen and paper or open up a spreadsheet and list out every single debt you have. I mean everything. Credit cards, student loans, that money you borrowed from your cousin last year. Write down how much you owe, the interest rate, and the minimum payment for each one. Once you've got it all laid out in front of you, it's time to make a plan. There are a couple of ways to go about this. Some people like the snowball method, where you pay off the smallest debts first to build momentum. Others swear by the avalanche method, tackling the highest interest rates first to save money in the long run. Either way, the key is to pick a strategy and stick with it. Now take a look at your budget. How much extra can you throw at your debt each month? Even an extra $50 or $100 can make a big difference over time. And if you don't have a budget yet, well, that's step one. Figure out where your money's going and where you can cut back. The most important thing is to stay consistent. Debt doesn't disappear overnight, but with a solid plan and a little discipline, you'll start seeing progress. And trust me, that feeling when you pay off that first debt, it's worth every bit of effort